Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Mikkel Thorup, and this is the Expat Money Show. Today, we're going to be talking about what's going on with Charlie Kirk, and I am joined by Natalie and Remso, two of my very dear friends and colleagues, and I thought I would bring them on because, to be completely transparent, I actually didn't know Charlie Kirk very well. I had seen a couple of his posts over the years, but I think maybe it is a generation before me. Maybe I'm a little bit too old. I'm more on the libertarian side of things, and I didn't really go through, kind of the movement that was Charlie Kirk. But it's been very interesting for me watching how he's affected so many people's lives and what has happened. So I thought I would bring on two of my colleagues here who understand the situation a lot better than I am and kind of go through things. So Remso, let's start with you and kind of explain, why is this hitting the world so hard?
Charlie Kirk wasn't just a political activist and, high-profile public figure in the United States. I would say that he was part of the Gen Z social media diet. When you look at a lot of the folks out there who are content creators, you think of the Mr. Beasts of the world and that type of stuff, the Jake Pauls. Charlie Kirk sat in a different sphere. He was, one, more political, two, more cultural. Three, he wasn't somebody who was a few generations older, kind of talking to young people. He was a peer talking to other peers. But what really set him apart wasn't just that, he had a confrontational style of politics, wasn't just his debates or his prove me wrong events, which he ran across college campuses throughout the country. It was the fact that he was coming at it from a completely different worldview. And Charlie Kirk, who was the founder of Turning Point USA, probably one of the leading driving forces for conservative causes in the United States among young people, he started it in 2012, specifically during the Obama era, an era in which I was still in high school. Charlie was only a year older than I was. And, Charlie was like, everyone seems to be moving down this progressive bent. And when he was looking at his peers, he grew up in the, middle-class suburbs of Chicago. Everything was moving in that direction. He called it Turning Point because he wanted to go ahead and return to what he considered to be, classical conservative American values. And because of that, that made him a target of the media, but that also made him somebody that was interesting among young people. So, the past several weeks following his assassination, you've just seen folks who have said, I never met him, but I feel like I knew him. And, across all the different platforms, he had his podcast and radio show, The Charlie Kirk Show. He was a regular contributor across many cable outlets. He was a close personal friend of Donald Trump, one of the main reasons I believe Donald Trump won the youth vote in 2024. And then he was creating his own content on top of everything he was doing as the CEO of Turning Point. So it was very hard to be a young person in the United States or even parts of Europe where you're discussing issues such as free speech, discussing issues such as the role of government, and not run into Charlie Kirk.
Well, I think it's interesting because I was probably overseas for close to 15 years. I had left North America probably 15 years previous before he really came on the scene. And I think that's why I missed a lot of these types of things. Maybe I was just born a little bit too early. I'm kind of year one of the millennial generation.
Possibly. I mean, what's wild is that if you went and really cared about what was going on in American politics, you were going to find him. What was really interesting to me is that I started seeing Charlie Kirk pop up as a popular figure in Europe. He started going to, the United Kingdom and hosting debates at Oxford. And he went ahead and actually helped start a Turning Point UK, which I worked, hand in hand with for their communications when I was at the Washington Times, because we were very concerned about what was going on in the United Kingdom. So, they were always a source that I could go ahead and send reporters to at that time. Charlie even, started actually putting down some grassroots in South Korea, of all places. What was wild was that in his 31 years of life, and really he didn't go to college. He started Turning Point in his parents' basement when he was 18 years old and immediately started traveling 300 days a year to go meet with donors. The wild thing about him is that at one point he was just, he went through phases. One, he was we just got to get young people to be conservative. Then it was, we got to go ahead and get them to actually vote Republican. And then it was, we actually need to discuss why there are so many issues with our country. And he took more of a cultural bent. And I'm saying this as somebody who, when I met Charlie, I met him in Cincinnati in 2015. That was probably turning point year 2 or 3. And he had been on Fox a couple times. He had been running around the RNC in 2012 when Mitt Romney was nominated. And he went ahead and actually got his first large donation from a very wealthy man named Foster Freeze. And that went ahead and really kicked off Turning Point. But it was so strange because he was just working so hard and so fast that nobody really knew what to take from him. What made him different from other content creators is that he didn't see himself as a content creator. He saw himself as an evangelist for liberty. And, the reason why I bring up those different phases in his life is because depending on who you were and the type of stuff you were watching, he was either going to be completely relevant or completely irrelevant. So if you were out of college, you're not going to see, Charlie during his young days storming college campuses trying to form Turning Point USA chapters. However, if you were a little bit older and you were voting, suddenly he was talking about why you need to go ahead and register to vote and why you should consider, especially in the 2024 election, why you need to consider vote by mail and all these things. So then he became more relevant. And then, much like his audience, he grew up with them. He was a peer to us. That's why, it's just hitting people differently. Charlie in 2021 got married. He had his first child, who's I think is now 3 years old. He has a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son. So then, Mikkel, Natalie, as you both know, having children changes you. And that changed Charlie. Charlie went through a big maturing phase. He was just different. He seemed so much older. And suddenly he started talking about, what do I want to actually leave for my children? Why do I actually want to promote getting married young, having children, men focusing on your family, being a servant to your wives, wives be a servant and a partner to your husband? He started on this whole other thing, which then started, transcending age, transcending demographic. He was a good person, and it would have been amazing to see what he would have continued to do. And because of that, what's so amazing now is that it took his death for many people to start actually paying attention to him. And the greatest gift Charlie left to a lot of people is that so much of his life was on film. We're going to be watching Charlie Kirk videos and Charlie Kirk, debates and stuff for many, many years. And I think for a lot of young people now, they definitely appreciate that more. When I was at the memorial this weekend in Glendale, Arizona, I had an Uber driver who was about 46, 47. And he said, I had no clue who Charlie Kirk was until after the election. And I really started watching his stuff. And now I'm, it's heartbreaking because now I'm a really big fan. And I spoke at an event here in Las Vegas Monday night, and it was a tribute to Charlie Kirk. And it was, I told people, like, when I first met him, I didn't like him. When I first met him, he was young. He dressed older. He spoke older. He had an air of confidence about him. I was in Southern politics, mainly in Virginia at the time. I had a podcast. I got jealous. And it was so funny. We were at a conference, and Glenn Beck was there. For a while, I wanted to be a broadcaster. And Glenn Beck was one of my broadcasting heroes. So I was at an event, Glenn Beck is speaking, and this kid I was at a lunch table with, who I was, eating with, just listening in on earlier, just judging him. Glenn Beck goes ahead and calls up Charlie Kirk from Turning Point USA. And I see him run up there. And I'm like, who the heck is this guy? And immediately I started hearing him talking, and I was like, oh, like he's actually doing some stuff. I should probably be nicer. I should probably be kinder. I should probably keep certain things to myself. Luckily, a few years go by, some maturing goes by on my end, and I get invited to a summit attachment he's doing to Freedom Fest here in Las Vegas. It was a Turning Point Young Latino Leadership Summit, and mutual friends swung my name to him, and I was invited to speak on a panel. And I remember at that point, he was just, he had certain conservative stances that I just don't have. And I was just very much like, who's this kid lecturing me on how I should live my life? But, I did my panel. It was very nice. I made some friends. And afterwards, I saw him running around. I go shake his hand. And I noticed that he's kind of looking past me. He's kind of just like talking. And I'm like, what's up with this guy? He was very polite. But what I realized later through one of his staff was that he had been up since 4 a.m. setting up the tables because the hotel staff didn't actually put down the tables. He put out the tables. He and his staff put out the chairs. He had to go ahead and reorder it. That guy had been awake for like 24 hours. Now, I always thought he was older than me, but not by much. I never knew he was only a year older than I was. So, I see that and I'm like, dang, like in just a couple of years, this guy has blown up a lot, but he's still very much hands-on. He had a very committed servant leader mentality that a lot I try and copy that a lot of people should definitely learn from just from a leadership perspective. But after that, I was like, I'm never gonna see this guy again. He's gonna go up and do all these other things. I ran into Charlie and his team specifically like every couple of years in different capacities of my life, in media, in social media, in politics. He's just he was always growing. He was always doing more. He always had 13 million things happening. And I went through these waves of like, I totally agree with him. I think he's awesome. No, wait, he's horrible. I don't think I like him. Oh, wait, he's actually making a lot of sense on this. And oh no, why is he saying that? So like I always just kind of observe this as like, it's no different than I am. I'm not the same person I was when I was 20. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. I should probably, lend that grace to other people. And without getting too much into it, like I was involved in the 2024 election. Working with several grassroots coalitions that Charlie put together. And he gave us all a lot of amazing opportunities, and it was a privilege to work on his team. And on his election night live stream, I'm in it in a corner, just haranguing and stuff. And it's my screensaver in a lot of places. It looks like a Renaissance painting where you see like one corner of people celebrating, and Charlie just like he was crying in that scene. He was crying. He has hands up as if he was praying. So I screenshotted that. And it's just it's a shame what happened. And ultimately, I think whether people, agreed with him a lot or agreed with him a little, we could always argue on the minor details of how we want to achieve freedom. But ultimately, Charlie Kirk, and I can say this now, seeing his life in retrospect, I still think of him as a young man of when I first met him. At least in the United States, I think we're better off despite all our problems because of his willingness to be in the arena. But I've seen the protests, I've seen the rallies across the world. The Unite the Kingdom rally, there were rallies in New Zealand, there were rallies in South Korea, Japan, throughout the world. I never even realized how much of an impact he was making. So,
Natalie, you went to a vigil this weekend. What was the environment like? What was the vibe like? How was that?
It was actually very amazing. I don't think many people understand that we were expected to have like protesters, and they even warned us when we first arrived that there were going to be protesters, and they were like, just be polite, be the way Charlie would have been, and just welcoming, and try to just, be polite to everybody. But when everybody started showing up, we were surprised. As the night went on, there were no protesters. Nobody showed up to protest. Nobody even showed up to try to protest. And then next thing you know, there are thousands of people around me. Now, keep in mind, the memorial I went to, it was in a very, very small town. So it was the surrounding towns around us who also came in. And I don't know how many people know this, but one town by us, it was called Bree, Ohio. They refused to do a Charlie Kirk memorial. They didn't want to do it. So the fact that Strongsville, Ohio came out, and it was the Strongsville GOP who did this event. They just took the risk and they did it. And the mayor actually allowed them to put up this huge banner of Charlie Kirk as a memorial. So this mayor went out on a limb, and he actually got hate because of this. He got a few phone calls to his office. But it was a beautiful event, and it was filled with love and prayer and worship, and there was no hate. It was just nothing but love. And I really think that was the way like Charlie lived his life. Like he wanted people to understand that, this is the path forward, and we need to do it with love and compassion and understanding, and just try to bring them to our side. And that's what I see in Charlie. Now, I think one of the reasons why so many people were touched by this was because Charlie wasn't just a man. He was also a father, a husband, a son, you know. So a lot of people, they just understood that it could have been their father, husband, son, whatever. So I think this is the general vibe that was going around. And Charlie was very young as well. I'm 38 years old. He was 31. So he's 7 years younger than me. And also being a parent, that just killed me when his wife talked about her daughter's blueberry budget. That was when I was just like sobbing in front of the screen. I don't know what you think or if you saw that, but she was up there and she was talking about how Charlie is with Jesus right now, and uh, he's working with Jesus on her blueberry budget, and that just destroyed me. So I can see how it affects a lot of people on just that alone. But the fact that he works so hard to get the message of liberty and freedom out there, and along with just wanting to communicate with the other side, that's all he wanted to do. He just wanted to talk. And I think a lot of people were upset by that. He wasn't trying to be like Antifa or anything. It was just, let's sit down and have a discussion. And he was killed for it. So I think that upset a lot of people. And it actually did the opposite of what I think his haters intended. And yeah.
Well, I think you bring up a very interesting point, because if we look at the left-right divide over the last 5-6 years, which has just become so untenable that, families are not speaking to each other, friends and college mates, no longer, discuss ideas or even see each other anymore. When something happens on the left, there has been this riots and protests, lighting car parks on fire and smashing things and breaking windows. And when it happened on the right, what are people doing? They're having, candlelit vigils and prayers, and coming closer to Jesus and to their family and appreciating. So all these slanderous remarks about, Nazis and Hitler and, all of these types of things really is completely unfounded, because you can see a number of occasions where this, the so-called accepting left has just lost their mind and turned to violence. And then something horrendous like this happens. And what do the right do? They come together and pray. It's very different.
Well, yeah, and they leave their areas destroyed every time. Like, we weren't burning anything at this prayer vigil or anything. We even made sure all the trash was picked up before we left. And it was just a peaceful gathering of people in love. And it was very beautiful. And there were people helping people. Like, I have my cast on. There were people helping me through the crowd and making sure that I kept it dry because it was raining. There was a downpour. We all still stayed there and finished the visual. So
now, Remso, you also mentioned about gatherings around the world. And I think this is the important piece of why I'm having it on the Expat Money Show, because at first glance, this might seem just like a domestic type of event. But in reality, it's not. It really is a humanity-wide type of event. Can you kind of talk us through that, or how you see it?
I don't think humans were really meant to move beyond the village, so to speak. Case in point, there's so many horrible things going on in the world. And when I was in college and everything, it was like everyone was trying to get you to constantly be upset about everything. Are you upset about the genocide in Darfur? Are you upset about, the beaches somewhere that are going to be covered in ice? Are you worried about the polar bears? Are you worried about this sectarian ethnic conflict overseas or whatever? And you just get to the point where it's like, yeah, you watch the commercials of the child starving in Africa. And meanwhile, you're trying to work on your life. You're trying to focus on the community around you. You're concerned about the stuff that you can immediately see and impact. And with the birth of social media and everything else, suddenly we just became inundated with everything. And there were many benefits to that. But things started to begin to feel smaller. The things also began to feel a lot more personal. And when it comes to stuff the George Floyd riots, for example, which occurred in 2020, people across the world took to that for, almost entirely different reasons. I don't know why you have to go ahead and burn down a Target and loot the Rolex store because a guy in Minnesota died and that type of deal. I think we started to take all these things around the world and we started to use them as excuses to do stuff in our own countries because we just wanted to find an excuse to be insufferable and to be horrible. And I look at that as the example, but more importantly, and I'll say this to Charlie specifically. I mean, there's very few people who are seen as global leaders. And I do not believe that Charlie would have seen himself as one. I think he very much focused on American politics. I think when certain, let's call them foreign actors wanted Charlie to begin to shift his focus and his advocacy, he did not bend to that, and because of that, he was chastised, and certain allies started to turn on him. But more importantly, the things that he spoke about, the things that he stood for, he was speaking for the United States, but he was really speaking for humanity. And I look a lot at the UK. It's one of the reasons why he did a UK tour. It was one of his last big like debates, such as the one he did in London. With some debate society there, and his big thing was like, there's a decline of the West. The West is starting to look unrecognizable, and where a lot of these civil libertarian freedoms such as free speech and democratic values and tolerance used to take place, they seem to be on the retreat, and socialism starts to creep back in. And I mean, this is really like one or two generations after Pope John Paul, Reagan, and Thatcher supposedly defeated communism and everything. And somehow it's coming back in an ugly way. Because he was willing to speak to that, I think a lot of people took courage in that. And Tommy Robinson, who's a figure in the United Kingdom, for example, who planned the Unite the Kingdom rally the same weekend. I mean, they held several moments of silence for Charlie Kirk, and a lot of people out there were not going to show up until what happened to Charlie Kirk. And much like that, where during the summer of love in 2020, you see riots in London and riots in Paris, and suddenly everyone's just rioting because they want to riot because some criminal died. It's just one of those situations where it's like you really start to see who people are when the chips are down, and that what we saw with the aftermath of the assassination of Charlie Kirk was that people are starting to understand that Charlie Kirk took a bullet, so a lot of people didn't have to. And when it comes to the left, it's like you want to know that your ideas are crap and they're horrible and they're violent and they're not, beneficial for society. Let's take a look at a photo of Charlie Kirk getting shot in the neck, wearing a t-shirt that says freedom under a banner that says prove me wrong. You just proved his point. And I think that struck a nerve in people across the world because freedom is constantly always having to fight for its right to be free, and people are. And we talk about that here at Expat Money, and you said this on the Tom Woods show recently, Mikkel, which is like, listen, you got to have political insurance. You got to be able to constantly come to a point where you're always in a position of strength, but you can protect your family, you can protect yourself, you can make decisions so that way you're able to protect your freedom while continuing to advance freedom for your family and your friends and stuff like that. It's many little ways it could be done in each of our lives, but I would have never thought that his death would result in the magnitude of mourning globally that we have seen.
Just to add in, Charlie was a very freedom-oriented person. He was studying Austrian economics as well. He's quoted as talking about Mises and Rothbard and Hayek. And I don't know if you guys saw it, but Tom Woods, he sent an email to. It was a beautiful email. And so he was very liberty-focused, especially in the Austrian econ circles.
As I look back, the things that I used to disagree with him about were stupid.
Yeah.
Like that's just it. Like we were 90% there. And, and many people who, he would invite to Turning Point events and he would invite on his show. They would get into these knockout, drag out debates sometimes, but it's like they basically agree on like 95% of the same thing. They were just fighting over the minutia. And he stayed out. He was a libertarian to libertarians. He was a traditionalist to traditionalist. He was who he needed to be within the movement to get them to work together. He was largely not a difficult person to get along with. And you can always tell about big people based off how they treat their employees. I've known hundreds of Turning Point employees. I was very good friends with his executive assistant who I went to college with. I know you can always tell based off how they treat their people. I never heard a single person complain about him. Could he be demanding? Yes. Could he be, critical and a perfectionist? Yes. He was never mean. He was never cruel. He treated everyone the same. And his thing was like, how do we get the job done? How do we make it excellent? And he carried that with him through, his organization and how he built coalitions for people. I don't think a lot of folks understand that he's the reason why Robert F. Kennedy Jr. dropped out of the race and endorsed Donald Trump. He brought that together. He also was one of the big people that pushed Tulsi Gabbard, who had ran against Trump in 2020 as a Democrat, to come out and endorse and join the Trump campaign. And now she's the director of national intelligence in the United States. He was a coalition builder. I mean, he had Dave Smith on a debate stage not even a month ago. Not even a month ago. I think there's something to be said about in a world where people want you to take hard stances and begin to ostracize people who disagree with you on certain points. Whether it be in business or in life, he understood the point of, what am I willing to fight over with my friends versus what am I willing to fight over with the people who are a threat to our liberty. And he knew how to do that.
Well, he pushed back against Tucker being deplatformed from the events. I do know that. I've heard the rumors and the talks about it. So
that was true. I mean, a lot of people don't like to point fingers now, but he was essentially ostracized from Fox News, which was bringing him on for years because of his claims regarding the 2020 election. He was also the only major conservative figure to stick with Trump, after the events in January of 2021. So, man, I've got to do so much weaving around for like the internet and stuff so that we don't get word triggered. But that was not a popular stance. And, between like 2020 and 2023, like his voice, I mean, people were really trying to minimize him for that. And then when Tucker got booted by Fox after the Dominion lawsuit scandal, Charlie was one of the first people there. There was a lot of protests this weekend among certain individuals who were not happy that Tucker Carlson was invited to speak at the memorial. But he was friends with Charlie. Yeah. I mean, he stuck by people. I know many individuals who are public figures and back end people who, run in the game of politics, who have all told me at separate points, Charlie stuck out for me. He didn't have to. He checked in when he was probably busy with other things, but he stuck by people because he was loyal. And I think, that's definitely one of those things where when you hear it in life, assume it's true. When you hear people say that in death, no, it's true.
Now, watching some of his videos and watching him actually speak, he didn't have a message of hate. Like you would think someone who was murdered, who was out there and, maybe, someone hated him so much that they had to kill him. Like I'm trying to understand this. In reality, he seemed very level-headed and could talk and try to convey ideas. Now, was he challenging people's belief patterns? Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's what we do. And I kind of look at my own life, and I have received multiple death threats over the years of putting out content. And, hey, I'm going to come to Panama, and I'm going to find you, and I'm going to, kill you or shoot you or beat you up or things like this. Not because I have a message of hate, but because I have a message where I'm challenging people to really look in the mirror. So for me, it was very shocking to watch this. And I had a number of clients who came to me and said, hey, Mikkel, you might want to, take it down a notch and calm down and maybe, self-censor all of these types of things. And then I was joined by a friend of mine last weekend, Joshua Sheets. He came over to the house for lunch, a very dear friend of mine. And he's also very outspoken, very upfront about a lot of things. And he made the point that he doesn't want to live in a world where you can't speak your mind, where you can't challenge people's beliefs, that you can't, try to, explain things from the other side. And, I've had to do a lot of soul searching after this and kind of figure out, like, what kind of man do I want to be? Am I going to just allow things to happen without giving my opinion? And, as a father of four, I have a lot of responsibility. I have a team of nearly 30 team members that rely on me. I have a wife and a mother that I care for, and then I have 4 children. So it is this really dynamic challenge on how much you say and what you bring to the table, or what you produce in content that, to be honest with, I'm still struggling with. I don't know the answer or what is the right way to go about this, but has really floored me throughout this experience.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've gotten death threats too, as you guys know, just speaking out on X. I get them all the time. And I won't be silenced. I have three kids, and if I don't speak out for their future, and this is something Charlie knew, if he doesn't speak out for his children's future, they have no future. It's going to be the collapse of Western civilization. And this is what a lot of people need to understand. We have to go forward with Charlie's message, no matter how much hate is thrown at us, how many death threats we get. We just have to keep going forward, because if we don't, our kids won't have any future to speak of, at least not one that is freedom loving. That's just my message to people. Just keep going, keep speaking out. And we could let this hate build up inside of us, but I don't think Charlie would have wanted that for the left. I think he wanted us to keep an open dialogue with them as well. So yeah, that's my approach going forward. Am I angry about all of this? Yes, I'm very angry, but I have to learn how to channel, I think, that anger into being productive and just trying to find new ways to reach out to people who don't agree with me at all.
Now, listening to podcasts, I am very much a heavy consumer of podcasts of other people's shows. You mentioned the Tom Woods show. Tom is a very dear friend of mine that I've had a chance to spend time with over the years, and been on his show 6 or 7 times, I think, at this point. I really appreciated his episode. Now, listening to him and a number of other people talking about the actual death itself, there seems to be a lot of differing opinions of what actually happened. Some will call them conspiracy theories. I don't really know what to call them, but looking at it, I must have listened to a dozen podcasts about this, and everybody seemed to have their own opinion, and it was so complicated. What kind of things, I don't know, maybe make sense is not the right word, because I don't know if any of this makes sense. But what's your feeling on the actual, what actually happened here?
Well, for me, I really believe it was just an unhinged leftist who took Charlie out. That is pretty much like common type knowledge. You mentioned earlier that about twisting words and stuff and twisting the message. And I think that was something that got lost throughout all of this, is that the left will take any message Charlie would put out and completely twist it. So he got a lot of hate over the years. And I think that's just something that we have to realize that they're going to continue to do. But along with that, I mean, there's a lot of like conflicting evidence that there was more than one shooter. There was a group of shooters. I'm not going to really comment on that, because I think the FBI investigation still needs to keep going, and we don't really know. But I don't know if you saw it, but there was a guy like waving his baseball cap, and he was like, I'm the shooter, and it gave the real shooter time to get away. But I just saw a video today, actually, and the guy who was waving his baseball cap was talking to like 2 or 3 other people. So we really don't know what's going on there. And personally, I would like more information. One thing I know a lot of people on the left were focusing on was that there was a guy who got on a chair and pulled down security footage like 10 minutes after Charlie was shot. It was like 10 to 20 minutes or something like that. And yeah, I don't know what's up with that. My guess was that they were actually...
That was one of Charlie's staffers.
Yeah.
And what they were doing was they were removing the SD cards because the police didn't have control over the area.
Yeah.
So what he didn't want to happen was, everyone leaves and flees, and then somebody goes and they get that backup camera. That was one of the cameras that would usually look at the people that were talking to Charlie, because they couldn't get close to him for security reasons. But they went ahead and verified on Monday, the day after the memorial, that it was a Turning Point staffer who did collect the SD cards from the camera, who did also turn it into the FBI.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was just they needed that in, video. So, but there were a couple other more conspiracy theories personally. I'm kind of like ignoring them mostly, because it's like this guy, he's a father and a husband. Let the family mourn.
I'm not totally convinced by the official story because I've kind of trained myself to not take
Question
what the initial
everything.
story, yeah, like what it is for granted. But like, and I'm not saying these as if I have answers. I'm saying these because I have questions, and I've also, I've tried to do as much of my own due diligence and researching as possible. But the one thing that I definitely can confirm, and I've definitely gotten to some, spats of some other former military, is the angle of the shot and everything. There's a couple like military YouTubers and stuff out there that tried saying that he was shot from behind and that,
All
it
that.
was a team of people. And I look at that and I'm like, that's stupid. That's absolutely stupid. You see in the footage very clearly that, from 200 yards away with supposedly a 30-06 rifle, the guy was aiming for Charlie's head. You want to usually go for the head, because what that does is that takes into account bullet drift because of, the altitude of the shot, the wind, all those other factors, the curvature of the round and everything. 200 yards isn't that far, but for somebody who's not a trained marksman or something, like it's something you got to take into account. So I take it simple. It's like he's 200 yards away. He's from an elevated area. He was on top of one of the buildings that could look down on where the venue was, and he was aiming for a head. What happened, and this is just the wild thing about it, he aims for the head, right? You see in the close-up footage, which I've had to watch too many times, it hits his bulletproof vest, which he had been wearing at every campus event for almost a year. It hits the vest. Then what it does is the round ricochets. And that's why the angle of the bullet is so weird. You see it hit his chest, it goes upwards. It went up through his carotid artery, through the back of his neck, impacting his spine. And this is where a lot of people had conspiracies about where the exit wound was, because entry wounds are usually smaller than the exit wound.
Yeah, never exit.
Yeah, because Charlie, who was like 6'5" and a very healthy man, he was a high school athlete and everything, still very much in shape. The surgeons found that his bone density was so strong and so healthy that in any other circumstance, it would have gone through, and because of the caliber of the round, it would have killed whoever was behind Charlie. The miracle in this, in the worst of situations, is that the bullet didn't leave his body. The other thing too is that because of the impact and where it hit, he also died instantly. We see in the video Charlie Kirk die. It was so catastrophic and so fast that he basically blinked and he was dead.
Oh, yeah.
So
His
it
arms when they went up.
yeah,
It was,
because what happened was the body was in shock.
yeah.
And this is where, and I got more phone calls on that day than I got ever in my life from people I worked with for years. And, the big thing was like, oh, we keep hearing that Charlie had a heartbeat. The body doesn't just immediately shut down. And for those in his security team and for a board member who was in the vehicle with him, they all said that, when Charlie was in the SUV, he had already died. He was dead. The heartbeat was because they were trying to assess his body. They got a beat every minute or so because the body was still shutting down. But in terms of being alive, Charlie died upon impact. My issue with the official narrative is that there's footage from the nearby dining facility of somebody filming the shooter in the prone position with the rifle. If I'm going to go assassinate somebody, I'm not going to be seen. So why is it this guy, much like the Trump shooting in July of 2024, you had all these regular, normal people who are not paid security professionals. Why are they calling out where the guy on the roof is with the rifle, who's not security or anything? That's one thing that really bothers me. The other thing too is, the drop off point where the rifle was. They immediately found the rifle wrapped in a towel, and it's like, they found it almost immediately. So either you have to assume that the shooter was just really rushing out, which obviously he's going to rush out of there, but he's not going to find a better place than, wrapping it in a towel and leaving it in a bush near where the shooting was. The other thing too is it's more of like a meme culture thing, and you see this in like, veterans and gun enthusiast circles where people like engrave bullet casings. I don't know many people, engraving bullets. And this was one of those things that you got with the Luigi Mangione situation where he killed that healthcare CEO, where he's engraving the bullets. It's like he said later that if you also assume that the communications between him and his transferee boyfriend were true, he also said later he wanted no one to know. But you're gonna leave all this evidence. You're gonna leave the rifle. You're gonna engrave the casings. Then you're going to say you don't want anyone to know. So you say so in your Discord chat with your Antifa buddies. And then you text your transferee boyfriends, basically a full confession. And then to top it off, you don't talk to the FBI after you've already been arrested and everyone's basically pointing the finger at you. That stuff's just too weird for me to look at it and think, maybe he took the shot. Maybe he didn't. I do not believe he was the only one involved in this. And you point to the guy who was arrested initially. He was the old man who was screaming, "Shoot me, shoot me, shoot me." He said he did it because he wanted to distract everyone from who the real shooter was. Now, he's also been charged and found of child pornography on his phone. So
Yeah, he's a
obviously,
completely disgusting person.
yeah, like he's a completely disgusting person. But the timing of that and everything, I believe that there are other people who knew that there was a conspiracy to assassinate Charlie Kirk. I do not believe that this was the act of one single individual. And I hope that they're brought to justice.
The messages are like so sketchy. Like, what kid talks like that? They don't.
They don't talk
like,
in full sentences.
No,
They
they
don't
don't.
talk in full sentences.
I don't know a single teenager, and my teenagers were homeschooled. They still don't talk in full sentences. So it's like this is the whole conversation is suspicious. And another thing was, as you were talking about bullet casings, there was an ice shooting today. I don't know if you guys knew that, but there was actually also engravings in the ice shooting today. It's just said like anti-ice. So apparently engraving bullet crate casings is like a thing now. Like. I don't know.
I'm a very public gun owner, and I was in the military, and I like guns. I don't even know where you could, unless you're doing it yourself, which I wouldn't want to try. Who are these people engraving bullets?
I have no idea because
I never knew that was a thing until like recently.
Maybe it's an American thing, but I'm also very enthusiastic with my gun ownership. But it's like it never crossed my mind ever.
There was that movie of Angelina Jolie, like Wanted or something, where they're like, you gotta curve the bullet, and they would like, and they would like engrave it, and it would just be like love, hate, animosity, and I'm like, that's so stupid. But now it's like they're engraving bullets. Even then, it's like he kept saying, if you take it as it's a fact, that he never wanted to be caught. For a person that never wanted to be caught and never wanted anyone to know it was him, he did the total opposite of remain anonymous, don't tip anyone off, leave nothing behind.
Bro, he went to Dairy Queen. He went to Dairy
Queen?
He went to Dairy Queen. Apparently, there's surveillance footage, and don't quote me on this, but like 4 hours after the shooting, he was in Dairy Queen.
There's something I don't believe the official heard of.
Do you think we will ever know what really happened or the real motivation or anything like this? It just seems to me like it's going to go on forever. This is going to be one of these unsolved mysteries. There's going to be a story, but I don't know if it will ever be, based on fact.
Within 2 weeks, this is already the Lee Harvey Oswald magic bullet theory. It's the FBI killed JFK. I'm sorry, the FBI killed MLK. I mean, the FBI may have killed JFK. We don't really know. The FBI killed MLK and had a patsy. The Sirhan who killed RFK was, under MK Ultra. This already has all the makings of it. I think the only reason why I'm more apt to say that something's not right now is only because of the digital evidence, the timeline of events, and the physical evidence that was found. When you take into account that it's happened now, and we have those three factors that don't really make much sense, that's where I'm like, I think we're more likely to find a definitive answer. But, I've been saying since Charlie was killed that like we still know nothing about Matthew Crooks, who was the who was the teenager who shot at President Trump in 2024. Never had digital footprint, can't find him in yearbooks or anything, nothing, like just completely just evaporated from existence. Is seen in multiple camera footages from attendees at the Butler, Pennsylvania rally, and they're calling to Secret Service and the police at the time. And immediately, as soon as the shots are fired, Secret Service shoots at Crooks, and everyone can see him laid out. He was almost too obvious. Ryan Ralph, who was the individual who tried to assassinate Trump in Mar-a-Lago, was charged to life in prison. And that happened yesterday at the time of this recording. And he tried to kill himself in the middle of court.
Yeah,
Right?
with a pen.
With a pen.
And then his daughter went ballistic. She was like screaming in the court and screaming at the cameras outside.
This is the only like pseudo conspiracy thing I'll say, and I'll wrap what I'm about to say up on this. But like the only thing that Ryan Ralph and Matthew Crooks have in common is that they both appeared in BlackRock commercials. They don't exist anywhere else except two ads put out by BlackRock.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna leave it at that.
As we wrap up this episode, what would be one thing that you think was the quintessential message of Charlie Kirk? Something that, he would want to be known for or remembered for?
For me, it would be God, family, and nation. Like, protect those things.
I'm gonna need like an extra 30 seconds, but it'll make sense. About a month ago, I was driving in Vegas with my wife, and we almost got into a really bad car accident. Somebody on the road near, I guess I was in their blind spot or something. They nearly got the side of the car where I was driving, and without really thinking about it, I moved into the right lane. Now, luckily, it was like 2 seconds. I went into the lane to my right, and then the person figured it out, and then I got back in my lane, and we were good. That really, really freaked me out because when I went into the right lane, I didn't look. I just did it. I could have hit another car. I could have not only, done something to my wife and I could have potentially hit other people. And that's what really bothered me. And for a couple of weeks, I was almost afraid to drive anywhere. It was one of those things where I don't understand why this of all things really bothered me, but like I wasn't doing well. I was very much like, I just see like my life flash before my eyes thing. I call myself a horrible Catholic. I only pray when things are bad. And I start, praying. I'm like, God, like, I don't want to die right now, but I know that's not really like my choice. Like, so I start taking everything in my life into account. And, the morning of, I went to, I'm part of a men's Bible group that meets really early in the morning here in Vegas. And I had, gone to that event on September 10th at around like 7 o'clock a.m., earlier than that, probably here in Vegas. And our pastor was talking about how over the weekend he had some crazy blood infection. He passed out in the middle of the grocery store and had to go to the ER. And while it was something that they could fix really fast, the doctors had told him that if he hadn't come in immediately, he would have died from this infection. It's a very rare, like 1 in 1,000 thing. It's very easily fixed, but it happens really fast. And he was like, and he's a very healthy man, a young man in his 40s. He's like, it's just, I already felt like I was good with the Lord, but like now I'm even taking it like an extra step because you just don't know when when your ticket's going to get punched. So I'm listening to this. I'm dealing with the last couple of weeks, and I'm going home. I get home. I get on my laptop. I'm talking to you, Mikkel. I'm answering emails. I'm asking my wife what's for dinner, and then I get a call from a friend, and I hang up because I'm busy, and then he calls me like 3 more times. I'm like, what the hell is happening? And immediately I pick up, and all I hear is Charlie Kirk's been killed. I'm like, what? I go online. I see the video, and in the oddest of ways, it was almost to me one of those situations where it was just like, take my words for what you will. God gave you life and he will take it away. And it's never on your terms. And I think we all wish to grow old and die in bed surrounded by loved ones. But that is guaranteed to no man. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. In the oddest of ways, I almost felt an odd sense of comfort of like, you don't need to worry about when you're going. You need to worry about whether you've done the best of the life and the time you've been given. And I can say without a matter of doubt that Charlie lived life to the fullest professionally. He owned multiple organizations, multiple businesses he didn't really talk about, incredibly industrious. He focused on, doing what he could for the country, doing what he could for his family. He loved the Lord. And there's no doubt in my mind, and you heard this for anyone that watched the memorial, that when he closed his eyes and opened his eyes, he heard the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And the following Sunday, I went to Mass as a runaway Catholic for the first time in 10 years. And that is something I am thankful for Charlie Kirk for.
I want to thank both of you guys for coming on and discussing this with me. A very hard topic, I think, for both of you and for many people probably listening today in the audience. So I thank you for opening up and sharing your experience and how this event has touched you. And I think we'll end it there.
Thank you, Mikkel.
Thank you for having me, Mikkel.